dream takes shape, it has form and substance, a community soon arose. A listening room, a hearing room, a place to find a home to play. A listening room, the hearing room, express yourself and have your say. The walls are thin, sirens blare, the tables sit near folding chairs, the stage is set with paint and glue, and love went into every screw. The light shine bright on every star, they come to play from near and far. The light shine bright on every star, they come to play from near and far. A listening room, a hearing room, a place to find a home to play. A listening room, a hearing room, express yourself and have your say. Hearing room, a listening room, you're welcome here, so have no fear. The hearing room, come in, my friend, where art can bloom. And welcome to the Woodshed Podcast. I'm Aaron Tornberg, and I'm here today with Rob Siegel. How are you doing today, Rob?
Hey, Aaron. I'm okay. I'm recovering from the flu that won't quite quit, but other than that, I'm okay.
Well, we'll talk more about that later, I'm sure. So I wanted to start with my usual, which is I'm going to talk about the hearing room, and I'm going to talk about the great programs we have here. We have a lot of stuff going on, starting with this podcast, which is Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m., and we also have on Mondays, the second Monday of every month is a blues jam, which is a lot of fun. Woody Carpinella, Roland Oxenbein, and Tim Feeler are the house band. And if you haven't played with them, then you really need to come because they're fantastic to play with. They're a lot of fun. It's a great time for everybody. So basically, they play a couple songs at the beginning, and then you get up and you can jam with them on 3 songs of your own. So that's a great time. Then we have Tuesday open mic, 7 to 10. Wednesday, Let's Have Words. That is 7 to 10 on Wednesday. We have Thursday Singin' Jam. That's where we have a big song party and everybody plays together. And, well, at least as together as they can. And we have words and chords up on the screen so you can follow along. We then have Friday nights, and Friday nights there's a lot of jams, actually, different kinds. The first one, first Friday of the month, I should say, is it's an acoustic jam. It's strictly acoustic, so we just get up and everybody does a song and leads it, and everybody else can follow along and jam and do whatever you do. And then we have the Bluegrass Jam, which is on the third Friday of the month. Other Fridays, we do other things. We've got a Pink Floyd open mic coming up, so you have to play Pink Floyd songs. Then we have Saturday nights, Performance Lab, and we have other things that are involving electronic music and also just shows. We have a lot of shows coming in. We have a really good one coming up. Well, actually, after when this airs, it'll be long gone. But we've had Guy Davis and the Kennedys will have been here. And I don't even know who's coming up after this show, which should be around summer sometime. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then we have Sundays, which is the Drum Circle, 12:30 to 1:30, and the open mic, 2 to 5, and various events, workshops, sometimes in Sunday evenings. So lots of great stuff coming up. And I also want to thank the Greenville Junction Shop. That's Junction, Junction, and Shoppy, Shoppe, because it's the Greenville Junction Shoppy. And it is a great place to get your upcycled items. They have furniture, they have household appliances, they have electronics. They have all kinds of interesting stuff, and you can check them out. They're going to be opening a showroom, which is going to be in Greenville, New Hampshire. That's where they're located, hence the name Greenville Junction Shop, or Junction Shoppy, I should say. And then they also have a website, greenvilljunction.com, and they have a Facebook page, Greenville Junction Shop on Facebook. And they have stuff on Facebook Marketplace, so you'll probably run into them if you regularly look at Facebook Marketplace. So you should check them out. They also do estate clean out and garage clean out. And if you want to know how to contact them, check any of the things I mentioned, their Facebook page, their website, or just call the hearing room and ask them. And you can find out more information.
If it's spelled Shoppe, are you sure that it's not pronounced Shoppe?
It could be, or Shoppe.
Shoppe, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways it could be pronounced. Shop, like that too. But it's a good place. I've actually bought stuff there, so I am a client as well. I'm not just talking about them. I'm also a client, as the Hair Club for Men guy
There you
says.
go.
Yeah.
Cy Sperling.
Yeah, that's right. He hasn't been on in a while. I haven't seen his ads.
No, actually, he had passed away a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
See, I did not expect our discussion to lead into Cy Sperling today.
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
So I'm here with Rob Siegel, who is an expert on Cy Sperling. And Rob, where are you from?
Well, originally, I'm from Old Bethpage, Long Island, which, by the way, is pronounced Long Island. I don't know where that whole thing about Long Island comes from.
Yeah.
No one ever says that. No one ever said that. I then spent my formative years in Amherst, Massachusetts. I feel like I'm more from Amherst than anywhere else.
Is that college or?
Well, my family had moved there.
Oh, okay.
In 1969, and I lived there when I was in junior high school. Then my family returned there when I went to UMass Amherst.
Okay.
So I was actually there 69 till 73, and then 76 till 81. So for quite a while, I was, I lived there longer than anywhere else. But since 91, I've been living in the tawny confines of West Newton.
Okay.
There's not a lot to complain about in Newton. It's very nice. Whenever I head up to Vermont, I feel that that's really where I should be, but Newton is where it has been since about 1991.
Well, in Vermont, you got to figure out what you're going to do there when you get there.
Yeah, well, I have to figure that out here anyway.
Yeah,
so,
true. Although you're a writer, so you can figure that out.
Yes.
That's a good thing to be in Vermont.
Yes, and there is land for the cars, which I need to write about, which is a
Right.
whole other story.
Which we'll tell.
Which we'll tell, yeah.
What did where's your family academics? Because you were in Amherst? Or?
No, my mother was a college administrator at Hampshire College. She was present at the founding of Hampshire when it opened in 1969.
Mm-hmm. And your dad worked there too, or?
No, my father had passed away. As I said, I'm originally from Old Bethpage, Long Island, and my father had passed away in 1968. And my mother wanted to start afresh somewhere else.
Yeah, that must have been really tough. You were in junior high then?
No, I was 10 years old. I was in fifth grade.
Yeah, my son's that age now. I can't imagine.
Yeah, well, I actually have a song about this, and one of the lines in the song is, we Jewish boys turn out okay. I actually had someone comment about it afterward that he felt offended by the idea that because he was Jewish, he felt now obligated that he ought to be okay, right? He ought to be immune from any of the pressures of life. But
that would be nice.
It would be nice for all of us.
Yeah.
But we all have the hand that we are dealt, and we all try to deal with it as best as we can.
Mm-hmm. Good advice. So you moved to where in 1991? To Newton? Or?
We moved to Newton in 91.
Okay.
Yeah. There was actually a brief sojourn in Austin. My wife and I were in Austin before Austin was Austin, 82 through 84. Mm-hmm. We were back once in 88, and it was almost unrecognizable then, even in the short span of only 4 years, in terms of the amount of expansion that there was. I'm sure it's completely unrecognizable to me now.
Well, it might be fun to go back, though.
Yeah.
Especially with a guitar,
Yeah, I keep hoping to do that, and it keeps not happening.
Did you... So did you major in English in high school? I mean, in college?
I majored in math and in physics.
Okay.
Then I became a software engineer.
Oh, okay.
And I was a software engineer for about 35 years, working in a rather unusual application involving the detection of unexploded shells on old military training ranges.
You had software to do that?
I wrote software to acquire data from a bunch of sensors on a moving vehicle,
like a robot kind of thing.
No, it was actually something that you drove. This isn't quite what it sounds like. So the 30-second version of this is that unexploded shells are only unexploded because they did not explode when they smacked into the ground 70 years ago. Unexploded shells aren't landmines. They aren't designed to blow up if you drive over them, right? They don't have a sensitive fuse. Mm-hmm. They have a fuse that's designed to go off when they hit the ground with a lot of speed and force. Mm-hmm. So it's very safe, in fact, to walk over them or to drive over them with a small light vehicle. You wouldn't want to walk around hitting them on the nose cone with a hammer.
Right.
And anything that is actually there on the surface, you would certainly want to stop or to drive around. But if something is in the ground and has been in the ground since 1943, it's actually very safe to be driving over.
That reminds me of the MASH episode where they had an unexploded bomb in the yard and they were listening to it with stethoscopes to see if it was still ticking.
Right.
Yeah. Does that actually happen? Does it tick?
No.
I didn't think so.
Not really. These are items that were used for training in this country, in every single state. There's stuff that was dropped out of airplanes. There's stuff that was fired from tanks. There's stuff that was fired from ships onto the shore. There's stuff that was fired from the shore at targets in the water. There's stuff that was fired from smaller shoulder-held weapons. It's a whole range of sizes, and the detection technology is mostly just metal detectors, high-sensitivity metal detectors. So I did that for 35 years, integrating sensors and software and acquiring data and processing data. And it was quite interesting, and I had to travel a lot for it. And now that's my former life, I guess.
Yeah. So do you have kids, grandkids?
I have 3 adult children, all boys, yeah.
And because I was just thinking when you were talking about that of Mindstorms, they have this Lego Mindstorm set.
Yes.
Which basically does what you're talking about. You program the sensors to do whatever you want them to do. And some of the things are wheels, but then some of the things are like there's a wall in front of you, do something.
Yeah, I think all of that came about after my children stopped looking forward to having Legos as their holiday presents.
Yeah,
I think that's more recent.
Yeah. So they don't have kids yet.
No.
So, okay, so you don't get to buy any more Legos yet. So.
Well, only for myself.
Right, I can understand that. I mean, I have a 10-year-old son, and so I buy Legos, but, I can't say I don't play with them. I mean,
well, my wife actually had bought me and the boys a Lego Volkswagen camper, which was very cool. And then last summer, around the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing, since my father was an engineer who had worked on the Apollo program, I had bought myself a Lego Apollo lunar landing module. And
that'd be tough to build.
And enjoyed building it immensely. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had a lot of fun with engineering, and you like to build things, which leads us to your interest in cars.
Sure.
So, you said you had a song about cars. Why don't we start with that?
Sure.
And then let's talk about why you like cars.
Sure. So we are all many things. Obviously, a part of me is that I'm a singer-songwriter, and the people that we know are also many things. So this is about my friend Rob Ayers, who was a musician, but that actually wasn't the bulk of our relationship. So this is about that. There's a guy I met at open mics I really like to hear. I'd see him every couple weeks over the span of several years. He's a damn fine musician, many folks would say, and while I'd agree completely, I knew him in a different way. We'd talk about cars, all the MGs and the Triumphs, and the stupid things we'd owned. We'd talk about cars, the ones we learned to drive on, and the ones that got T-boned when we weren't playing our guitars. We'd talk about cars. He'd drive to gigs in his Porsche, I'd take my BMW. We joked how real musicians have to drive a Subaru. I have this dead old British car I'd bought 6 years ago. He'd ask, what's the latest with the Lotus? And I'd shake my head and say, and we'd talk about cars. The swagger of a Jaguar, the panache of an old Cord. We'd talk about cars, how to balance out your passion with what you can afford. The appeal of patina and old scars. We'd talk about cars. He once told me a story I'll remember till I die. He just sold his old sports car and took it out for one last drive. He wound it to 100 until the blue lights made him slow. He was cool, contrite, and truthful, so the cop just let him go. But then he pushed his luck and asked, any more of you ahead? The officer was indignant. He said, I can't tell you that. He was about to drive away when the policeman took a stroll, walked back to my friend, winked and said, "It's clear on up to Lowell." I don't know anyone else who could have gotten away with that. I finally got the Lotus running on a beautiful spring day, and just then I heard the awful word that my friend had passed away. On that car's first drive, I thought and cried he would have loved to hear about this, and I'd never get to tell him. We'd talk about cars, the places that they took us, the adventures on the way. We'd talk about cars, and I'll miss that just as much as the music that he played. And if he's up there driving around the stars, I hope he finds someone to talk about cars. Thanks.
So that was about Rob Ayers.
Yeah, that was about Rob Ayers.
He passed away, about a year ago?
Yeah, not quite a year ago.
Not quite, yeah. So I think a lot of people who listen to the show knew him.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah. But great song. That was
Thank
nice.
you.
So you like cars, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so... excuse me. So, yeah, the larger arc of the past 35 years of my life, maybe 40, has involved engineering and music and cars. Really, those three things. I had a Triumph. I had a 1970 Triumph GT6 Plus, which was the car that proved that everything that's bad about British cars that you've ever heard is true. All of it. The electrical problems, the metal fatigue. I bought it the summer after my senior year of high school, so in between high school and college. So that was 1976. So this was a 6-year-old car, right? It wasn't a 30-year-old car. It was a 6-year-old car. And the amount of rust and the number of things that would spontaneously fail, and as I said, the electrical problems. There are entire websites that are devoted to jokes about electrical problems on old British cars. The electrical systems on most vintage British cars were made by a company called Lucas Electricals. And so, as I said, there are entire websites devoted to Lucas jokes. Why do the British drink warm beer? Because they have Lucas refrigerators. Lucas vacuum cleaners, the only Lucas product that doesn't suck. And
That's a good one.
And my personal favorite, Lucas doesn't claim to have invented darkness, only sudden unanticipated darkness. And so if you owned a vintage British car and ever had the wipers spontaneously fail in the rain, which I had happen, and the headlights spontaneously fail at night, which I had happen, and the wipers and the headlights spontaneously fail at night in the rain, which I had happen. It's all true, all of it. But, in fact, I have the Triumph to blame, or to thank, really, for the part of my life that's involved cars, because I was 18 and I bought this car, and, I started college and I didn't have a lot of money, and it broke all the time, so I had to learn how to repair it all the time. It probably ran 40% of the 2.5 years that I had it. But before I bought the car, I was into bicycles. So I was familiar with mechanical systems in general. And at some point, you just look at them and you figure out how they work, and you take them apart and you figure out what you need to buy and you put them back together. So when the Triumph started to do that, when it overheated in between Lexington and Amherst, the first summer that I had it, and I could see antifreeze streaming out from the front of the engine, and I saw a part of it with a pulley and a belt. I could figure out, that must be the water pump, so it must need a water pump. So I could hitchhike into town and buy a water pump and borrow some tools and replace the water pump. And so that was actually the start of a lifelong attraction to cars and to repairing cars. And although it started with the Triumph, my passion is actually 1970s era BMWs. So cars like BMW 2002s, which is the model, not the year, right? That's the boxy two-door sedan that BMW sold in this country from 1968 to 1976.
Now, what do you like about BMWs over other cars?
Well, I mean, in the late 70s and early 80s, there really wasn't anything else, maybe Alphas, that compared to the car in terms of technology and performance and handling and acceptable amount of reliability. Mm-hmm. The way that the car would feel when you would drive it, both a combination of what's commonly referred to as road feel, right? The tactile sensations of the pavement as translated through the tires, through the front end, through the steering rack, into the steering wheel, mm-hmm. how it feels when you're driving, how it feels when you're heading around a curve. There really wasn't a lot that could compare to it in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. Eventually, other cars caught up, especially Honda. I think that was a lot of the appeal to Honda in the 1970s, that they also had that kind of a feel that connected you to the road. Mm-hmm. Excuse me.
Yeah. So when you got into cars, it was just out of necessity. It was... But you didn't go into that as a career. You went into software instead.
Well, I'm not at all a trained mechanic. Mm-hmm. I have no training or official certification whatsoever. But that it doesn't really matter. I was always attracted to cars. Growing up on Long Island, I mean, I remember when I was 5 years old, someone up the street had bought a 63 Corvette. Mm-hmm. And I remember, as a 5-year-old kid, thinking that it was the most beautiful car that I'd ever seen.
Right.
And so imagine my surprise 30 years later when I found out that I was right. That, in fact, not only early 60s Corvettes, but the 63 Corvette that has the so-called... split rear window is universally acknowledged for its aesthetics. So, so I always had an eyeball for cars. Then, when we were living in Amherst, when I was a kid, one of the many Hampshire college students who had come through our house had a BMW 2002 and used to drive me around in it, around the back roads of Amherst, mm-hmm. Forever impressing upon me what this little German sedan could do. So when we moved down to Austin in 1982, and I started to earn a little money as a software engineer, I bought my first 2002, which was equal parts rust and Bondo and paint. Mm-hmm. And I repaired it, and just as I was starting to enjoy it, I found another one in much nicer shape, so I bought the other one and sold the first one, and that started a pattern which has remained to this day of buying cars that are somewhat needy, and because they're needy, they're affordable, and repairing them and holding on to them for a while until I find something else. And as they say, lather, rinse, repeat. So that has been the pattern.
So is the 2002 also available in a 2002?
No, they made that car 1968 through 1976.
So they didn't do like an anniversary 2002.
Well, all manufacturers, all automotive manufacturers like to try to capture the nostalgia of their most popular models, right? So Volkswagen had reissued the Beetle, even though the reissued Beetle had nothing to do with the original Beetle.
Yeah, that did not look like the original at
well,
all.
The original Beetle was rear engine, rear wheel drive. The new Beetle was front engine, front wheel drive. So in the industry, there's a term for this. It's called heritage based redesign. Some cars have remained in production forever, right? The Mustang, has remained in production. And so when a car remains in production for that long, there are certain cues for the design that the manufacturer has to retain. So with the Mustang, it's a certain look of the grille, and it's the taillights in the back, right? That each set of taillights has these 3 vertical bars in the back, which dates all the way back to like 1964. When Volkswagen reissued the Beetle, it was that characteristic curved shape of the Beetle with the fender lines that also were curved. They're about to reissue the bus as an electric vehicle.
Yeah, I saw that. That was interesting.
Yeah, and so it's very square and compact for that reason. Almost no company can really reissue a vehicle that's truly a copy of the original, because the crash safety requirements have changed so much since the mid 1970s. It's just really not, it's just really not possible.
Right. Yeah, the safety issues. I remember I had a Mazda 323 I bought in Toronto because I lived there. I went to college there. And then when I came to the U.S., they didn't want to let it back in the country because apparently they'd passed the law for the airbags here, but they hadn't passed it there. So that meant that my car didn't have a passive restraint system, so therefore I couldn't bring it in.
Wow.
Except I did anyway, because apparently if you try to bring it into Massachusetts, it's a problem. Try to bring it into Ohio, they don't care. So
interesting.
Yeah, so it depends which state you're in. But anyway, it was it's interesting. What do you tell people about cars like other musicians? Because musicians, in my opinion, are not often car guys or car girls.
Yeah.
So how do you advise them on, like, so I want to go on a tour, right? And I need a reliable car.
Well, I guess the short advice is not to buy a 20-year-old 190,000-mile German car, right?
Yeah, probably not.
Just because that's what I like. If you're not able to repair them yourself, they can get very expensive. In general, the advice to buy Japanese, and I think when in doubt to buy a Honda or a Toyota.
Right.
I think is extremely sound advice. If I had a real job tomorrow, right? If I was no longer a self-employed writer who works from home and had to go back to a regular commute, I would probably be looking at something, at something like a Honda Fit or a Toyota Yaris, something small.
Oh, the Yaris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, something small and very fuel efficient.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. I think a lot of people tend to buy more car than they really need. I think a lot of people are attracted to SUVs. And if you have a family and you really have to have the room, I get it. If you live someplace where there's a lot of snow, I get it. It's hard to tell about the snow thing. I mean, here in Massachusetts, obviously this past winter has been extremely mild.
Right.
But if we return back to the patterns of weather that we've had in the past, where we're on like the snowstorm of the week plan, then obviously a vehicle that has all-wheel drive is extremely handy. But for the most part, it snows, they plow, and then you're fine. My advice to people is to buy smaller, to buy something that's more fuel efficient.
Yeah, the only problem with the Yaris is I don't know if that has enough room for like a sound system with multiple guitars.
Well, yes. I mean, obviously,
that's the problem.
Obviously, you need to buy something that works for your lifestyle, and a vehicle that small can only hold so much. But as I said, if I excuse me, if I had to buy something tomorrow, that's actually what I would buy.
Okay. So, Rob, what do you have another song for us?
Sure. So, as I said in the intro to the last song, we're all a lot of things, and sometimes I'm just a 61-year-old guy trying to not have a heart attack. And so this is about that. This is called the JCC. Round and round the indoor track, the sets of old folks walk. I catch conversation snippets from their daily talk, complaining about some doctor who's supposed to fix their knee. Me and Sal and Chaim and Mort down at the JCC. I was indestructible until I hurt my back. I used to pound the pavement, now I walk the padded track. I don't like the treadmill, I can't stand what's on TV. So it's me and Sal and Chaim and Mort going round the JCC. Who else comes in at 9 a.m. but well-off wives and old Russian men? And me, it's on my way to work. Maybe they think I'm some young Turk. I used to love hard living, I used to paint this town. Now I go around in circles, slowly slowing down. But I feel oddly comfortable among these aging Jews. because I can't avoid it, because I am one too. Well, I'm slower than one buff old guy, but I'm quicker than these three. So it's me and Sal and Chaim and Mort down at the JCC. Until I cease all motion and they're shuffling past me. It's me and Sal and Chaim and Mort down at the JCC. Thank you.
I like that. It's sort of an homage to a certain type of getting old, you know. It's great. So you are a writer now at home.
Yes.
Working from home.
Yes.
And you write about what?
I write about cars. So so for almost 35 years, I have written a column that is called The Hack Mechanic, that I've written for the magazine of the BMW Club of America. The magazine is like Road and Track. It's 140 pages a month in color. It goes out to the members of the club, which is about 85,000. And I have written for them every month since the mid 1980s. And about 7 years ago, the concept for the column got spun out into a book, which is called Memoirs of a Hack Mechanic, and which you're able to find on Amazon. And shortly after that, well, maybe about a year and a half after that, the publisher offered me a job writing other books.
No.
And so at this point, my career in engineering was sort of winding down. And I decided, why wouldn't I want to become a full-time automotive writer? So I did. So I left my engineering job of almost 35 years, and I started to write full-time for a publisher, writing additional automotive-related books. And to my stunned surprise, that ended about 18 months later. Because it's tough times in publishing. It's the, when you're able to find a lot of what you need online, it's challenging for a publisher to put the time and the money into a repair manual and to charge $30 or $40 or $50 or $60 for a repair manual, when the temptation is, if you need to change a front headlight in a car, just to hop online and hop onto YouTube and find out how to do it.
Right.
And so that job ended somewhat abruptly. It actually ended right before the 2016 election. So I found myself without a job. I found myself without health insurance. I had to learn how to navigate the I had to learn how to navigate the Massachusetts health insurance connector. Thank heaven for the great state of Massachusetts and its healthcare. And every little hiccup that happened in the first 2 years with health insurance, when there were repeated attempts to repeal so-called Obamacare, was extremely stressful because that's where my healthcare was and still is coming from. I'm grateful that it is relatively stabilized. My wife and I are both self-employed, so we watch all of this very carefully, without heading off way too far on a tangent regarding health insurance. But so I'm the only person I know whose income is derived from buying stupid cars that I really shouldn't be buying, resurrecting them and taking them on highly questionable road trips and then writing about it. But that in fact is what I do. I write 2 different magazine articles a month, and then I write 2 different online articles every week, and then I write and I self-publish my own books. So I now actually have out 6 books, all of which you're able to find on Amazon. These range from the first book, Memoirs of a Hack Mechanic, which is sort of the long arc of my life as a car guy. And most of us are pretty much the same, right? Most people who are into cars, it doesn't really matter if you're into 1960s American muscle cars or vintage BMWs or Packards, right? We all seem to be motivated by the same set of passions.
Right.
Some of the books are actual repair manuals. Some of the books are individual stories about individual cars. But that's what I do. I write about cars.
Okay. Well, we'll talk more about that. I'm going to do a little break here. I wanted to mention right here that the Hearing Room is looking for members. We are on a membership drive. We are trying to get 200 members, and what that does is it allows us to pay our rent, to pay our utilities, and to keep functioning. We do ask for donations for a lot of the other stuff we have, like sound system, and some of the money coming in, like from shows and different things, goes to that. But what we need is just to not have to worry too much about the rent and about the utilities. And if we got 200 members at $100 per year, that's how we do that. So if you are thinking about becoming a member, if you are not thinking about becoming a member, become a member either way. The way that you do that is you go online and there is a link for membership. You can pay the $100 there. And if you haven't been to the Hearing Room yet, if you're hearing this and you haven't been here yet, come to the Hearing Room first, then join. But you should definitely check it out. We have a lot of great stuff, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, going on. And we also are looking for people to just come and help out. We have people needed for door person. Somebody's got to stand at the door and greet people and tell them where the bathroom is and tell them that there's popcorn available and coffee and tea and all that other good stuff. So we need people to help with just stuff like that. We also need people to help just clean the place sometimes. We work hard to keep it neat and clean, but it's not like we have a janitorial staff. It's all volunteer. So if you feel like you can help with any of that, that's good. If you feel like you can become a member, that's great. And you should just check us out at hearingroom.net so you can find out more information about how to do anything and about our events. So hearingroom.net is the place to go. We also want to thank the Greenville Junction Shop for their support of the show and of the Hearing Room. The Greenville Junction Shoppy is JUNKTIONSHOPPE. They are a great place to go for your upcycled items from furniture, household appliances, electronics, and lots of other great stuff. So check it out and go to the Facebook page for Greenville Junction Shoppy. And you can also go to their website, greenvillejunction.com, or pretty soon we'll announce where the showroom is for Greenville Junction Shop. It is in downtown Greenville, New Hampshire, and we'll have the address for you once it opens. So we're back with Rob Siegel. So, Rob, do you have another song you wanted to play to start us on the next half?
Sure. Let me actually try another song about cars. I usually try to keep the singer-songwriter part of my life and the automotive part of my life completely separate. I don't want to be known as the singing mechanic or anything.
Hey, that might be a good hook.
So, about a year and a half ago, I played a show where there was actually an assignment, right? You had to come to the show having written a song about a topic that you were handed in advance, and so the topic was alternative facts. So I thought I would have some fun with that as a car guy.
Okay.
It's what charges up your battery so that when you turn the key, your starter motor spins and your headlights let you see. And if it dies, the battery light should come on your dash. These are the alternator facts. It's a winding and a magnet rectified to DC, and on an MG or a Jaguar, it's not a certainty. It regulates the voltage on an RV or compact. These are the alternator facts. And if it stops its charging, you might be out of luck. You might run off the battery, or you might just be. Forget about your shocks and struts and your rotors, pads and drums. All of them's important, but they're not bothersome. Somewhere on a long road trip, you're gonna get sidetracked. These are the alternator facts.
That's good, playing on the alternative. That's good. And I don't know anything about alternators, so yeah. Although I have killed my battery before, but
very common.
Yeah, I actually tried to charge my cell phone on a camping trip, and apparently my battery wasn't in the greatest shape to begin with, but that was enough to just kill it.
Sure.
You wouldn't think it would be, but yeah, it was enough. Should have turned on the car while I did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That would have helped. That was a song prompt you got.
Yeah.
So do you go to a lot of open mics? Are you a regular?
Yes. It ebbs and flows over the years. The longer story about my life as a singer-songwriter. I had played acoustic music in my 20s, and then I hung a hard right into rock and roll. Mm-hmm. My wife is a drummer. We were in and out of bands for about 15 years. and then at some point in the 1990s, after child number 2 was born, we, sort of had to hang that up as the major thrust in our life, which it had been for quite a while. And so in the mid 1990s, I returned to playing acoustic music. I remember vividly walking into the open mic in Cambridge at Passim, and it was absolutely mobbed. And this was 1995. I only found out years later that actually that open mic had just started maybe 2 months beforehand. I didn't know that at the time. At that time, the 2 open mics that were like, the place to be were the one at Passim and at the Old Vienna Coffee House. The one at the Old Vienna folded in the late 1990s when the Old Vienna stopped having live music. The one at Passim continued until through the early 2000s. A lot of the folks that I know from the singer-songwriter world in Boston, I know from those 2 open mics. Some of them went on to great things. Josh Ritter, Mary Gaucher, Chris Delmhorst, Mark Arelli, on and on. Some folks were more like me, who continued to try to have another job that they used to pay the bills. In my case, what happened was that I had put out a CD in 2000, which got me a little traction and some amount of airplay. I put out a second CD in 2004, and then, as I said, I have 3 boys, and at some point in the mid 2000s, I looked at the cost to send them all to college, and I did what an engineer does. I wrote up a spreadsheet, right, of the worst case, the best case, and then somewhere in between. Right. What if they all went to, what if they all went to state schools? What if they all went to private schools? And then somewhere in between. And I kind of realized that I needed to treat my engineering job, which I had been really treating as a cash cow to fund the music and the cars, that I really needed to treat it as a career and to make sure that I had it and that I had the income from it, for X number of years. And so that's what I did. And in order to do that, actually the triggering event was that I was on a geophysical survey in Albuquerque, and it was a Friday night. It was a Friday evening, and I was looking out onto the mesa where a crew was operating the equipment and surveying back and forth, and all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, I have a gig tonight in Boston. Right? I was supposed to be the feature at an open mic, and I had just completely forgotten. Right? It was a survey that happened without a lot of warning, and the guy who hosted the open mic at that time was Jimmy Dore. I forget which open mic it was, but Jimmy was the host. So I tried to get him on the phone. I couldn't get him on the phone. I sent him an email. It was pretty funny. Hi, Jimmy. I'm sorry. I'm in Albuquerque. I completely forgot. It was only an open mic feature. But, in fact, I was doing a lot of work-related travel for my engineering job. And, as anyone who is a musician knows, if you book a gig and cancel it, it's not good. It's not a good thing for anyone. You lose credibility, as a performing songwriter.
Right.
So I just decided I needed to take my foot off the pedal of trying to actively head out there and gig. And so that was what I did. And I didn't expect the foot to be off the pedal for 14, 15 years, but that was just what kind of happened. So in fact, it was open mics that really allowed me to keep my hand in things. It's not that I stopped writing. It's not that I stopped playing. With some level of consistency, I continued to show up at mics. I can't say enough about the whole open mic world. I mean, some of anyone who hosts an open mic, just hats off to you. The amount of work, the amount of headache, the amount of emails that you have to answer. It's just such a wonderful thing to have open mics that are consistent and that thrive and that have an audience of both audience members and musicians. It turns into a community. It's very self-reinforcing. It's very supportive. It's where folks can go to learn their craft and to hone their craft, or if you're someone like me, to try to keep at least one hand in so you still feel like you're involved. It's a godsend.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I get a lot out of open mics from running them too, because they're, it's where I want to be. That's the thing. So if you want to be there, it's a community. Everybody wants to be there.
Right.
Pretty much. Nobody has to. It's great.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
So you got another song?
Sure. Let me play a Michael Troy song.
Okay.
Did you know Michael?
I didn't know him personally. I think he passed away when I was starting to play out again.
Yeah, about 4.5 years ago.
Yeah.
So Michael Troy was a singer-songwriter from Fall River who was really the best of the best and had he wrote an astonishing body of material that had a sense of authenticity about it that any singer-songwriter would kill for. He wrote a lot about working in mills and about working on boats. So this one is called Ricky the Kid. I like to introduce this by saying that it's so good and has such a sense of authenticity about kind of hard living in Fall River that even a Jewish guy from Newton like me can sing it and still have it work. So
right.
So this is Ricky the Kid. When the sun sets upon the hill, on the brick mansions by the sea, that surrounds the playground of hell, my country 'tis of thee, where we drank dreams from a paper bag, and Jack Frost paints the sky in drag, blood red and gold in the deep blue sea. on purple skies of majesty. Ricky the kid, he ain't no more. He's a casualty in the social war. Some say he ran his life to hell. Ah, but me, I say he slipped and fell. Hole in his boat cut short his time. Now he's hanging with some friends of mine. He washed up on God's golden shore in a pool of blood at the jewelry store. Is there mercy for me? I know it's hard to understand from the viewpoint of the disciplined man who's never had the sleight of hand and been taught never to trust. When the kids run wild in the park and the bullets fly across the dark, when the kids play life like war and the devil keeps the score, Ricky the kid, he ain't no more. The police came prepared for war, and Ricky got caught in the crossfire, and a bullet killed the man next door. And when the smoke cleared, nobody won. Just a crazy kid and an empty gun, and a friendly fire casualty. Is there mercy for me? When the sun sets upon the hill, on the brick mansions by the sea that surround the playground of hell, my country, 'tis of thee, where we drank dreams from a paper bag, and Jack Frost paints the sky in drag, blood red and gold in the deep blue sea, on purple skies of majesty. Is there mercy for me?
That was great.
Thank you. God, I miss Michael.
Yeah, it was. I've heard his stuff online. I never got to see him live, but yeah. And so you're now working on just more articles, or what are you working on for writing at this point?
As per the first song, I have this Lotus.
Yeah.
I am mainly a vintage BMW guy, but there was an event that happened when I lived in Amherst. When I was in junior high school, I worked at a hi-fi store, and the guy who owned the store. I wanted to say the guy who owned the shop, the shoppy, the shoppy, was into cars. He was probably in his mid-30s, and he was into cars. And so, it seemed like every month, he would own another car. And when I was 13 or 14, one day he showed up in a red Lotus Europa. A Lotus Europa is a little fiberglass-bodied, mid-engined British car that the roof line is 42 inches above the ground. It comes up to your hips. It's this impossibly low thing, very weird looking, very angular, and I was just absolutely transfixed by the car. And there was a man who worked at the shop, and by a man I mean someone else in his maybe 30s, and he looked at the car and he said something that I'll never forget. He said, "A car like that you can get sex out of." And I remember hearing that, and the way that I, as a kid, right, as an adolescent, the way that I heard that was, a car like that you can attract women with. That's what I thought he meant. And it wasn't until years later, 30, 40 years later, 30 years later, that I realized that's not what he meant at all. What he meant was that certain cars, mostly sports cars, the combination of the look of the car, right, how it looks to the eyeball, right, it's low, the lines, it's very aesthetically appealing, and how the car feels when you drive it, the feel of speed, right, the whole wah, wah thing, is an experience that's so sensual that it can border on the sexual, which is something I've learned to appreciate as I've gotten older. And this is actually a lot of the topic of my first book, right, Memoirs of a Hack Mechanic, that as someone, who adores his wife and, who has set a goal, right, a lifelong goal to remain happily married and to be faithful, right, that, in a world where men tend to seek out sensation, and you're able to get sensation in a whole variety of ways. You're able to get it through sex, you're able to get it through drugs, you're able to get it through sports, through a whole variety of activities, that one of the ways to seek out sensation is with cars. And so one of the things that's worked for me is, it's better, if you want to remain happily married, right, it's better to go through a lot of cars than to allow one's roving eye to move from cars to women.
So does that mean your wife is jealous of your cars?
No, okay. Quite the opposite. It means that it means that one of the secrets to a long-term happy marriage is to support rather than to thwart the other's passions. Whatever those passions may be. Obviously, there are limits, and in the car world, there are lots of stories about people, mostly men, who go way over the edge with cars and spend way too much money and crater their family finances.
Unless you're Jay Leno and you can afford to go that.
Well, Jay Leno, Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah, they get all kinds of cars.
Yeah, well, right, and so a part of this, right, there are all sorts of avenues. There are all sorts of websites that cater to the roving eye that people have for cars. There are all sorts of shows on cable, like Jay Leno's Garage. I'm very happy for Mr. Leno. If I had his money, I'm sure I would have his warehouse. But I don't, and so I don't. And so a lot of what I do as a writer and as an automotive enthusiast is I write about how, well, as I said in the line about the song about Rob Ayers, how to balance out your passion with what you can afford. Right. A lot of what I do and what I write about, right, there's a tendency that people have with cars to believe what they read which is that if you want to invest in cars, you should buy the best possible example of something, right? The prettiest, most highly restored, most original, most rust-free, right? The most flawless car. Mm-hmm. And people read this and they believe it. And if what you're trying to do is invest, sure, right? But if you're just an enthusiast who's trying not to ruin the family finances, right? The best possible example of a BMW 2002, a fuel-injected 2002, like a TII, mm-hmm. these days can run over $100,000, right? One of them just sold on the website called Bring a Trailer for over $100,000. Now, that's what you would call an outlier, right? That's all the way on the right edge of the bell curve. That's presumably the best of the best. But there are any number of other examples in the high tens. None of my cars are at that level. Mm-hmm. What I do is I buy what I can afford. And so my advice to people who are into vintage cars is not to, in fact, search for if you can afford the best of the best, that's great. But for a lot of people, what happens is that they drink the Kool-Aid of thinking that if they don't buy the best of the best, they're not properly investing. Mm-hmm. And they watch the cars appreciate out of sight, and then they're not able to afford anything. And right. my whole thing is, why not just buy the car that you can afford, even if it has some issues with condition, even if it maybe has some rust. But you will be the person driving it around on Sunday with the smile on your face.
Right.
And if you wait too long, the car will appreciate out of sight, and then you're not even able to afford, the one with maybe the faded paint and the ripped seats.
Right. Well, that's good advice. So let's hear another song.
Sure. So I'm, from a songwriting standpoint, I almost always write from the idea of the song, right? I come up with a topic. I would like to write a song about so-and-so. And then I work on writing that song. It's very rare that I have a flash of so-called inspiration, and it makes me reach for the guitar. But one of those moments, when the television show Heroes was on, I was watching Heroes. I was watching the first episode of Heroes with my family. And in the first episode, the villain of Heroes was a guy named Siler, who was a watchmaker. And in the first episode, you saw him wearing the magnifiers on his face, right? Mm-hmm. The glasses, in order to see very small things. And I looked at that, and I had one of these moments when I said to my wife and one of my children, "Excuse me, I have to write something down." And that wound up turning into the following song, which is called Watchmaker. He sits there all hunched over, those weird glasses on his face, impossibly strong lenses to interrogate small space, in placing gears with tweezers and winding tiny springs, the enabler of time itself, creator of small things. But in an age of Chinese knockoffs, $5 out on the street, digital disposable. Some point admit defeat. Soon he will not be of value. His lease will be withdrawn. The store will be a Starbucks. The watchmaker will be gone. Put the set right there, says Ernie, as it shudders to the ground. The second floor store made sense before they weighed 400 pounds. Philo Farnsworth's troubled children, he used to fix them all. When you still could change a picture tube and then degauss a coil. But now the world wants plasma, 82-inch LCDs. When they break, no way to fix them, you just buy a bigger screen. Like American supremacy, we always thought would last. The small TV repair shop will soon be in the past. These things we break and throw away without a second thought. How does it work with people when we start to break apart? Do we still pick up the pieces when the going gets complex? Or like the watchman and repairman, is the marriage counselor next? Perhaps it's this New England soil where waste is next to sin. But I can't bear to throw away what's barely broken in. So I'll fill my house with picture tubes and not wind my watch too tight. And keep loving the same woman until I get it right.
I like that. It's an interesting song. And sort of, when you say watchmaker, of course, it makes me think of spirituality as well. And so it kind of has a little double meaning there. Not on purpose, maybe, but...
No, that actually wasn't on purpose.
Yeah.
So that's one of the songs off my most recent CD, which is called A Landscape of Ghosts. You can find it online. I recorded that about 2 years ago now.
Yeah, so what's your website? Do you have a website for your music?
It is robsiegel.com, ROBSIEGEL.com. It is an embarrassing, antiquated website that it's on my list to revamp, but it is what it is. So it's actually half automotive-related stuff and then half singer-songwriter-related stuff.
Oh, you got both. That's good.
Yeah.
So we're getting toward the end here. What advice do you give to other musicians or people who are interested in going into music and getting involved locally or further?
Well, I'm probably the worst person in terms of any advice in the musical world. I mean, I think it is a documented fact. I mean, I think there are actually articles in the research world that have been written about this sort of thing, that people who succeed in the arts, whether it's singer-songwriter world or other parts of the musical world or writing or in dance or in film, sculpture, as painters, that the people who succeed are typically the ones who put all the eggs in that basket and follow that passion.
Right.
And in contrast, those of us who have a career and who just try to dabble, or try to have a presence at some subsistence level or at some level, are far less likely to have as vibrant an artistic career as those who go all in for it. Life is all about choice. Life is all about balance. I can't say I regret the choices. We all try to maintain balance. I remember reading in the Parade magazine, that accompanies or used to accompany the Sunday newspaper, right? Every year there was an annual issue of Parade where the cover story was what people make, right? And so there were a whole slew of little photographs on the front, and there was a name and an annual salary. Some of them were people you would recognize. They would typically have the President of the United States, and they would list his or her salary. They would typically have entertainers. Then they would have people you didn't know, who were welders and school teachers. So a number of years ago, I remember seeing Ellis Paul on there, and it said Ellis Paul, musician, and it had it had his annual salary. I don't know how they obtained that number. I presume they would have to ask him. But it was an interesting number. It was a number high enough that made me think, wow, that's certainly more than chump change. But compared to where I was at that point as an engineer, trying to sock away money to send my 3 children to college, I was like, okay, that's great. So now I know that's, that's the ceiling, right? That's as much as one could ever hope for realistically trying to do this whole singer-songwriter thing.
Right.
And I remember at the time seeing that and feeling that my choices were completely and utterly vindicated, right?
Right.
I felt totally at ease with my choices. I still feel at ease with my choices. As I said, I never intended the time away from trying to actively advance myself as a performing songwriter to be nearly 15 years, right? And so my recording the CD 2 years ago, and my being here, my trying to book shows again is kind of trying, to slowly turn around that super tanker. Right now that I'm a self-employed writer, I have a little more time to be able to do this. But ultimately, anything with art comes down to you reach a point where no matter what the left half of your brain says in terms of doing it or not doing it, you reach a point where the right half of your brain is either happy or it's not happy. And if it's not happy, it's almost always because you're not doing enough art, right? You're not being creative enough.
Right.
And that's its own thing. I mean, there's the part of that that's quote unquote success, but also there's the part of that that's creativity, right? And so to come full circle, advice, my advice is to keep that light burning and to be creative, because that's the part, that's the only part that you have control over. Right. I have control over writing my own songs. I have some degree of control over recording my own songs, though they never come out quite the way that I have in my head.
Right.
I don't have control over how many shows a month I have, right? That's just not something that I can control. And that's, that's not a knob that I can just turn. Mm-hmm. But the creative output part, absolutely, that's a knob that I can turn. And that's something that I need to remind myself of all the time.
Right.
There's, anyone who writes music will say, and I have this conversation with other singer-songwriters all the time, there's this moment of like 3 minutes where a song goes from something that you have in your head, and whether you write it on the computer, which is how I usually write. I usually write lyrics in Word, and when it's largely complete, then I pick up the guitar and I start to play. Mm-hmm. Other people will do it more iteratively. But usually there's this period of about 2 or 3 minutes where right before that there's no song, and at the end of 2 or 3 minutes, all of a sudden there's this thing that's walking around in the world that wasn't there before, and it's magic, and that's the thing that you live for.
All right. Well, how about you do one more to close us out?
Oh, I would love to.
All right.
So, as I said, I almost always write from the topic, and I had this idea about writing a song about mortality, which isn't anything new as a topic, but I thought I would write it literally from the standpoint of moisture, in that, our life starts in moisture. We're conceived in moisture, we're born in moisture, and life, the older you get, life more feels like an exercise in getting drier, right? You dry out. Mm-hmm. It's sort of a natural drying out. And so I thought I would write about this, and the challenge was not to turn it into dust in the wind, right? I mean, other people have written about this metaphor, but I thought I could write about this. Mm-hmm. And so I got 2 lines into it and a refrain, and then the song kind of took its own little turn. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you just need to let the song kind of walk down the path in the backyard and find its own special little place, and not try to use your iron fist to wrestle the song into what you, the writer, thinks it should be.
Right.
And so I had no idea that this was what I wanted to say. But
all right.
This is called Until I Blow Away.
Okay.
It starts wet and screaming, it ends dry and dreaming, and the part in betweening is what we call life. It's rarely expected, it's auto-corrected. It's the blossom in winter, the rose in the ice. So I didn't know what was waiting for me in the snow. Each morning I'd wake up certain that they would let time pass through me till I blow away. It wasn't apparent till I lost my last parent, and so I had 60, an orphan became, and everything shifted from what I was gifted, and the veil was lifted between me and the rain. And oh, now I can see what's out there waiting for me. Now Most nights I lie down, hoping that they will let time pass through me till I blow away. It's the vote that's been hacked, it's the deck that's been stacked. I might have a third act, but I doubt a fourth. I'll learn my last lesson, I'll book my last session for gentle procession, finally north. And oh, now I can sense the thing for which we've no defense. I'll find things to do, but all I can do is just let time pass through me till I blow away. And oh, now I can feel the shivering point of the steel. I'll stay here and fend as long as I can, and let time pass through me till I blow away.
Well, thank you, Rob, for talking to me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Aaron.
Yeah, so your website is Rob Siegel, Siegel, so ROBSIEGEL.com, and it will be revamped, but you have stuff there.
I have stuff there.
Yeah, you can find out about Rob's writing and Rob's music, and is your music available on iTunes, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, all of the usual suspects. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we've been talking to Rob Siegel today, and we are at the Hearing Room, hearingroom.net. So please check out our website, and please check out the Greenville Junction Shoppe. Greenville, Junction Shoppe. And keep an eye out for their information about their new shop opening in Greenville. So have a great week, and listen next time.
Thank you so much.
If you start with a dream and share it with some friends, the idea deepens and grows. The dream takes shape, it has form and substance, and community soon arose. A listening room, the hearing room, a place to find a home to play. A listening room, the hearing room, express your